This is where I lived. It's not the best place to live. You hope for more for yourself, for your children. But for better or worse, it was still ours. We knew each other. Most of us looked out for each other. We were like a village.
That was home for us. That was our community. We knew about around there. We didn't know about any place else.
There's a lot of customs, there's a lot of traditions, there's a lot of things that were passed on mouth to mouth, chest to chest, face to face.
This is where I'm connected. This is where my family is. This is where my roots are. This is my home.
It was home. And without it, some of us would not have had a home. On February 2nd, 2000, we were told that our homes would be torn down.
Public housing in Chicago is about to change. Today,
I didn't really believe it. Man, I thought, where am I going to go?
Now, under this new plan, 51 buildings will be demolished. Thousands of
There were a lot of mixed emotions. You were glad that you were going to get better housing, but you weren't sure if the better housing, when it arrived, you were going to be one of the residents that was living there.
It has to be housing first. You cannot say you're going to tear anything down. The housing has to be built for them to be in it.
I figure it was a change for the better. It couldn't get any worse than what it was.
CHA has failed, and CHA must come down.
It's kind of heartbreaking, but guess what? Times are changing, and we have to move with what's going on with the times. We can't be stuck in the same place where we were at.
Things did change. Our homes came down. In their place, new neighborhoods grew up with beautiful apartments and condos. Stateway Gardens became Park Boulevard. Madden Wells became Oakwood Shores.
Welcome to my home.
It was good for the environment and good for the kids because the apartments we got now is beautiful.
Some of us moved back into new neighborhoods, but most of us didn't.
When people realized everybody wasn't going to have a right to return, then it became a feeling of uncertainty. A lot of people started falling through the cracks.
And a lot of them got evicted, homeless and what have you, because they weren't prepared for this outside life.
2, 3. They say the plan for transformation is a big story for Chicago. It's a big story for its community leaders, developers, and politicians.
This is the largest transformation of public housing in the world.
But most of all, it's a big story for us, the residents of public housing who have struggled and lived through it all. This is our story.
We are fighting for the lives of our children and well-being and safety in Henry Horner Homes.
The story for us goes back close to 20 years ago, when CHA began emptying its buildings and the Henry Horner Mothers Guild took them to court.
The suit alleges that CHA has violated federal law regarding the way it has maintained the property and
The mother said that CHA allowed Horner to decay so they could demolish it. The courts agreed. So CHA signed a consent decree to replace the abandoned units with hundreds of new apartments. But in other developments, the Housing Authority continued the practice of allowing units to become vacant.
You see, once a building becomes less than 50% occupied, now you can legally close it. That's a HUD law. And so what they said was, once people moved out, don't renovate the apartment. We were told, I've gotten memos that say, hey, don't renovate. Don't renovate.
In fact, what is happening in Cabrini is happening in Abla, Henry Horner, Robert Taylor Homes, and will be happening in every CHA community throughout Chicago. The CHA continues to demolish buildings simply by not repairing them.
Again, we went to court, when we learned that plans to redevelop Cabrini included hardly any apartments for its residents.
CHA would have private developers build 2,000 units, most of it market rate, and only 15% of those units, 15%, would be available for very low-income residents. This is the land grab that the residents have always feared that would come to pass.
These were very hard years for us. Our housing was left to fall apart, and drug selling gangs took over empty units and then entire buildings.
We have had overcome some challenges, being looked at as the lost generation of public housing. And so we've had to endure a lot of things that normally living in a broader society you wouldn't have to. You had to endure a neighbor's son getting killed, endure going to look for employment, being told that you don't have any skills. And you had to endure that, where am I going to get the next food to sit on the table for my kids to eat? So you had to take little,
It wasn't easy to believe that things would change for the better.
Good evening, how are you?
But CHA assured us that it would, and they agreed to a contract that would protect our right to return to the new housing.
Now, we promised that we were going to build about 25,000 units of housing so that every lease-compliant resident, every lease-compliant person at Stateway would have a unit at the end of the day.
The right to return was very important to us, and it was the main reason we got involved in the planning.
I'm going to do something that most CHA folks don't do, and that's tell you the truth.
In spite of our anger and distrust, we wanted to believe in the promise of the plan. So we held on to hope that this time things would really get better.
Anything that we don't have the answer for you, I guarantee you we will get the answer for you.
Every time this group acquired land and built something, a third go to the residents.
In the beginning, we participated in working groups with the CHA and developers to plan our new neighborhoods.
We're on it, and that's all I can tell you is that we are on it to the fullest extent we can be on it. So
it was a challenge to let go of the past.
We had to tear down some barriers about the whole trust thing, because back in the late 90s, no one trusted the authority.
I want you all also to focus on this opportunity.
Eunice and myself had to really reassure them that residents were able to play a major role in designing the building type, the street structure, the community and supportive services. They were able to have great input.
If it's washing windows, hanging drywall, whatever, make sure that the residents have opportunity. That will
At Wells, Avila, and a few other locations, we were all working pretty well together.
We always said that we wanted social service program.
And we felt good about the role we were playing. But in other communities, things didn't go so well.
We sit in meeting after meeting after meeting, called a working group. And then when we finished with what we wanted to happen, it wasn't built like that at all.
It was already a preconceived notion of what was already planned, what was going to be, how they were going to go about it.
In my mind, it was just so that they could say that leadership was at the table. And this is why I say that. We put our input into the plan, we gave our ideas, but it was almost like it went in the ears of those that was around us, the 7 at the table. But our plans and our input did not come to fruition.
At Cabrini, our input was more than ignored when CHA violated its contract to build replacement housing before evicting tenants. We went to court again.
It could have been a model as opposed to, they dictating to you what they're gonna do, when they're gonna close, how they're gonna close, how many people are gonna be displaced, what kind of services you get, what kind of services you need, where your kids gonna go to school, what kind of parks are gonna be, those kind of things.
Actually, we last met with the TIF staff, their consultant, our consultant. All the consultants got in the room, agreed on the underwriting.
Without consultants or lawyers of our own, it was hard to negotiate the working group meetings and defend the needs of our residents.
That will tell us a lot on just how we're going to do the conventional financing, the tax-exempt bond financing, the bridge financing, for the tax increment financing as well. It's a complete package.
And that's Peter's apartment. And Stanley's apartment. That's my yellow and green apartment. Yeah, see my walls, my colors. Do you see the colors on my wall? See you in the next life.
Our buildings came down, and by the thousands we left to find new housing.
I'll be so glad when I get up out of here.
Most of us found apartments close by, where we had family and friends and where landlords would take our housing vouchers. Some families moved to other cities. Others moved to what we call opportunity neighborhoods in Chicago's suburbs.
To me, it's better. You feel safer about your home, the schools that your kids go to, the parks that they play in. I think it's a much better environment for them.
For Norma and others, the move worked out well. It meant better neighborhoods and sometimes better jobs. But for most of us, the move out of public housing was really tough.
Transformation is good for a lot of residents, but there wasn't enough time to prepare them for the outside, because they had too long been set in high-rises lifestyle. And they had to deal with a landlord, deal with this and that.
Now see that jump back up again. Look over in there.
A lot of us ended up in broken down apartments, some with sewage in the basements and lead paint on the walls.
They told the landlord that all this paint in here has lead in it. She's 2 years old.
They're gonna move all these public housing residents out of public housing because it's not safe, it's not sanitary. But yet, you will push people out into units that couldn't pass a housing inspection.
Lots of families had to move 3 and 4 times, which was hard on our children who had to switch schools over and over. Worse still, some of us even got evicted because our landlords failed to pay their bank loans.
Before I even moved into the place, it was already in foreclosure. And I wound up 6 days before Christmas on the street.
Section 8 tenants, they didn't know that the house was in foreclosure and they kept continuing to pay the rent. And then they looked up and got a letter and said you have to be gone in 30 days.
We asked the CHA to slow down the demolition. After all, there was a housing crisis for people like us. It was just hard to find a good place to rent that we could afford.
In Chicago alone, there's a shortage of 153,000 low-income houses.
Even CHA's own waiting list got longer as families who couldn't find places looked to the city for help.
Using CHA's annual report for 2002, there were over 54,000 applicants on the CHA waiting list, representing about 144,000 people. Of those people...
In 2002, CHA's own auditor was highly critical of the agency, saying they had rushed to move us out. It said CHA's relocation program did not even come close to accomplishing its objectives. Soon after, civil rights lawyers filed a class action lawsuit on our behalf.
We are confronted with the resegregation of large numbers of African Americans into areas lacking those very housing, education, and employment resources they so sorely need.
Well, a lot of residents moved into communities where they already had a higher crime rate in an impoverished community.
The red shows where the families have been relocated. The dark red...
There are a lot of residents who wanted to move to opportunity neighborhoods when they found out that these Section 8 vouchers or housing choice voucher wasn't being accepted in these communities, or that these communities didn't have the correct bedroom sizes. It was a great disappointment.
Over the next few years, CHA responded to the lawsuit and auditor's report. It got us better support services to find apartments and jobs. By 2005, some of us began to move back into new mixed-income communities where our old buildings once stood.
We want to just thank the good Lord for this day. This has been a long process for us, a long process.
In the spring of 2004, resident leaders from Madden and Wells and officials from the city of Chicago broke ground for the new Oakwood Shores neighborhood.
But today, hopefully, as this project moves forward, our families will actually reap the benefits.
Many would reap benefits. All the senior buildings got rehab. HUD fixed up the public housing family properties at Trumbull Park, Loudon Homes, Argyle, Wentworth, and Lawndale Gardens.
It's wonderful. I live in a new apartment. I'm very happy, very pleased.
But the great majority of families who left the high-rises, the families who were supposed to benefit from the new mixed-income communities, were facing a different reality.
They literally tore down every building and let the land sit for 2.5, close to 3 years with nothing built. All of the people are moved off the land. They're now in scattered site. They're now in Section 8. They're now in traditional public housing units and in homeless shelters.
I'm living in a 1-bedroom apartment that they converted into a 3-bedroom apartment. I have so much mold in my apartment, it's pathetic. I'm sick because of it.
8 years from the start of the plan, stories of hardship and pleas for help went out to CHA's new chief officer.
And I'm too afraid to say anything because I'm afraid the landlord is going to give me an eviction notice.
Okay, well, let me say this, and I can understand that feeling.
The Residence Journal and the Chicago Reporter wrote a lot about our struggles. Then in 2008, a Tribune investigative report depicted the transformation plan as adding to a growing housing crisis for the poor. It showed how the cornerstone of the plan, the development of mixed-income housing, was years behind schedule and caught in a real estate downturn. And it acknowledged our fears that we would be displaced and forgotten. 10 years from the start of the plan, only 14% of public high-rise residents have come back to the mixed-income communities.
If you look at the numbers, the population returning is very low. So we have to do something. We have to get some renewed something. I don't know whether that is policy or some type of actions so that we can get the residents back.
And there's been a number of questions about how do we bring people back?
Getting residents back has been difficult. Many families got discouraged because construction took so long.
What it takes, what the site-specific criteria is for those sites, and when we're going to be leasing.
Others got locked out because of low credit ratings or past arrests in the family. Some were afraid that if they came back and somehow broke the rules put in place by developers, they would be evicted and left with nowhere to go.
This is so confusing, and there's a lot of misinformation on the street.
You know, you're excited about something at the beginning, then when you start to see it roll out into effect, and you see how other residents are suffering, then yourself begin to suffer, you know, it pulls a sense of hope out of you.
That's not to say there hasn't been change for the better. There are families who moved into new apartments in Avila, Wells, Cabrini, and especially to where it all started when we first fought back for better housing.
We are fighting for the lives of our children.
That point, we got like 60% of our residents to actually come back because they stayed here.
The Mothers Guild legal victory in 1994 set them apart in the plan for transformation. The court judgment gave them rights, so they had a real voice in their working group. It gave them power to enter into a real partnership with the CHA.
It's still power to this day because the residents have a voice. They're not being dictated to. At Horner, you just can't come in here and just change things around without getting a say-so or negotiating. And if you can't negotiate, you go to court. Those are the benefits. Other places don't get that. Whatever happens, it happens.
Horner's residents were not forced out, dispersed, and then required to meet tough screening criteria to get back in. They stayed on site until new housing was built, and then they shared responsibility for reshaping their new community.
This is my home, this is my life, this is my family, this is my foundation, and these are where my roots are. Why wouldn't I want to move back here? This is my support, my social gatherings, my schools, my childhood friends. I mean, live, work, play, everything within my community.
10 years after the plan for transformation started, our old neighborhoods have been transformed. But except for Horner and to a lesser degree Avila and Cabrini, few of us live there. Chicago's high-rise poverty is all but gone. Yet there are far greater numbers of homeless women and children than ever before. Though we're glad that some got better homes and more chances for their children, there are far too many of us still struggling, still hoping for better days ahead.
When you hear about their challenges and what they've been faced with getting to this point now, you hear a different story than you've heard. You hear a different story. I think you hear the real story.